All right, welcome to our webinar, The Digital Transformation Journey. I'm Andrea Hayes, principal here at SVA. I lead our business applications team, which means we implement Acumatica ERP and a bit of Shopify and BigCommerce as well. I've got a guest here, Greg Foster from Acro Commerce. He's Director of Sales. And really, we partner with Acro Commerce on a lot of the digital agency side. So really today, what we'll do is go through the digital transformation journey kind of in three steps. So what you'll see is, we'll start with Basecamp. So that's really your operational core. We'll go through the Ascent and the Summit, and Greg and I will kind of talk through what each of those steps in the journey look like, the challenges, and things that you can benefit from each step.
Great to have you, or thanks for having me, Andrea. I love your metaphor of climbing a mountain. I think it's such a great way of telling the story.
All right, Greg, and I got a little excited there and advanced it. So where I'm going to start is the Basecamp. And I'll kind of talk through, this is really SVA's specialty. So when we talk about Basecamp, what we really mean is like the solid operational core. What does that mean? It means getting all of your data into one place. So not having those data silos, which means, maybe Greg has an Excel sheet of data, I have an Excel sheet of data, maybe they say different things. So really think one version of the truth. And that's really the power of an ERP or enterprise resource planning solution is that you can all get everything in one place and everyone can pull from that data and run analyses without kind of having different points of truth. What that also does is it reduces manual rekeying and inefficiencies of data, right? So if I'm seeing all the data in one place in one system, I don't have to re-pull that and redo any analysis. It's all there. So think connected systems is where we kind of think about APIs and integration. And again, everything in one place. What we like to do in terms of strategic direction is really think and design your system, your core platform for where your company is going, rather than what all of your needs are right now. So think with the end in mind. Understand what your strategy is. Are you looking at bringing on a new product? Are you looking at bringing on a new offering? Or maybe expanding the same offering into a different territory or a different region. Might you need something like multi-currency? Are you thinking of doing an acquisition and now you need multi-entity? So what we really try to do here at SVA is understand where your direction is, where you're going, and really build the system or design the system that meets those future needs. And really that gets into the de-risking future projects. The other key thing that we do here at Basecamp is really think about a land and expand approach. So let's land you in a smaller scope and then, get confidence from maybe that smaller implementation and then grow that across the company, right? And so on our website, we have For Supply as an example story. What we did there was we first implemented Acumatica ERP, replaced a pretty old system. Now they have a single point of truth. And then what we did was we implemented CRM. And then implemented an e-commerce site, right? And so what, we kind of landed in success there, understanding what their future vision was, and then grew that implementation. And now they have, a pretty good platform in terms of ERP connected with their e-commerce site.
Well, I hope I can jump in, Andrew. I think, first of all, great summary. I love this analogy of Basecamp and kind of the walk up the mountain. And I think the example you had, I think you said For Supply, that really hits home for me. I think one thing that we always preach is this idea of how critical that single source of truth is. And that's usually going to lie in the ERP. I'm hoping I can just ask you a quick question. Now we're talking about the climbing metaphor. We're sitting at Basecamp right now. That's your guys' expertise. I was just curious, one question that comes up to my mind often with ERP partners is on our side, like when it comes to what tech we're going to recommend, it's reasonably straightforward. I mean, there's a lot we got to uncover, but it's fairly straightforward to really present our findings. But getting the internal alignment behind those recommendations is the hardest part. So I guess to kind of tie it into like Basecamp, when you guys are building out that Basecamp or that plan of that single source of truth, what's maybe one of the biggest challenges you face in getting the business to actually agree on what that complex logic actually is and getting that alignment internally?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the hardest part, right? Is getting everyone rowing in the same direction rather than against each other. So what we like to do is called an alignment cycle. And what that essentially means, it's a systematic way to surface thoughts, views, and opinions from folks across the company on a specific topic. And this topic, would be implementing a successful ERP within 1 year, right? So what are your thoughts and views on that? What are your concerns? What do you see as an ERP? Maybe you think an ERP is only one part of the business or only financials, and in fact, it's financials and operations and pick, pack, and ship and warehouse management, right? So we first start by understanding where people are and meet them where they are. And so again, that looks like identifying folks across the company, doing systematic interviews on a topic. And then what shakes out is kind of 4 types of thoughts, right? So you have a case for action, drivers. Why do we want to change? Or maybe we don't want to change, and now we know that so-and-so in accounting doesn't want to change, right? And that's really good information to have. We also start to understand the goals, right? So maybe leadership has a different goal than the operations team or the people on the ground, or maybe the accountant or procurement team. They all have different goals. And so we like to understand exactly kind of where those are. The next category is barriers, right? So what do people see as barriers? And maybe some see different kinds of barriers than others. And so in the last type of thought or opinion that we surface is unintended consequences. So if we do this, what will happen, right? And so we kind of start with understanding, okay, what are the things that people are, how are they defining the project? What's the scope? What are their goals? And then we're going to sit down with that cross-functional team and go through areas of alignment and misalignment. So where we surfaced areas of non-like-mindedness, how can we facilitate a conversation to start to understand what that should look like, right? And what lands from that kind of series of alignment cycle meetings is a list of prioritized and agreed upon roadmap, right? So we would understand that, okay, what concerns are, what everyone's goals are. And now that we've had those conversations and we've worked through it, we can start to understand what that roadmap is. And that becomes the change and transformation roadmap. And so it will span multiple years, span multiple projects. And we also like to have, a look at it every 3 months with leadership to assess drift. Hey, have the priorities changed? But really what we see is that, half of it is people want to be heard, right? They want everyone to understand, okay, here's my concern if we do this. So it doesn't become an I told you so, and they start to row against you. So really that alignment cycle, we kind of start there, understand the vision, turn that into a list of agreed upon, prioritized, like-minded goals. And then, phase it out, right? So I've mentioned the land and expand. We don't want to do it all at once. We want to de-risk every project. But we turn that into a list of, of projects, and we have program management that starts to manage those projects as we go.
Yeah, I think, Andrea, I mean, we've worked with quite a few different, ERP implementation partners. And one thing that has always stood out for me from SVA's perspective is the level of business consultation you guys inject into that relationship. So that's why I was asking. It seems like you guys really got alignment locked down, and I don't always see that. Often we get into a project and maybe the ERP has been implemented, but it's still in shambles as far as everyone aligned and happy with where it's headed. So kudos to you guys. I don't think everyone's doing it the way you guys are. So yeah, I was just kind of curious to see how you guys really lock that down before you even kick off a project. So that's awesome.
Yeah, appreciate that, Greg. So with that, maybe we get into kind of the next phase here in terms of the Ascent. And this is where, Greg, I'm going to look to you to actually kind of go through, so we landed in a single point of truth. We kind of talked through how we get there, the pitfalls, right? Seldom is it the system itself, though there are sometimes gaps in the type of ERP that you might implement, but it's always bringing the people on board in the process as well. So then let's kind of start to go up the mountain here and think about e-commerce and customer portals.
Yeah, I guess I'll maybe dive in. I think perfect setup. That's kind of where we come in, is in the Ascent. So yeah, to lay the stage, an ERP has been implemented. We're now looking to add some level of e-commerce functionality on top of that. That might be exposing customers to direct-to-consumer type of flows, kind of a little bit more the basic e-com everyone's familiar with, or the more complex kind of business-to-business side. That might be, self-serve portals and stuff like that. And I think maybe I'll just start with kind of one of the biggest challenges or barriers that we see coming up pretty frequently. And it's something we call the integration trap. If you follow any of our socials or have ever been to our website, that's a term we throw around a lot. And essentially, everyone, very logically are assuming that a plug and play or a native connector that comes with a new e-commerce platform is just going to work out of the box, connect seamlessly with other technologies like their ERP. But that's simply not the reality. These integrations, they often fall short, especially on that B2B side.
Yeah, so that kind of plug and play myth, Greg, can you break that down a little bit more? Because I think that is really attractive, at least, to a buyer of, hey, this is already ready to go. Why can't I purchase it and then it works, right?
Yeah, and I mean, that's often how, I wouldn't say these connectors are marketed, but people, when they hear native built-in, I mean, in your mind, you would assume that everything is going to work perfectly. And really, these integrations or connectors, they're kind of built on what we would call surface level data. So that's like syncing a product name or a simple retail price. Think more of the common kind of features of a direct to consumer experience. It's basic, it's simple, but these connectors, they really miss, that complex B2B business logic that, companies like SVA just worked so hard to build out in the ERP. And that native integrator, I mean, it has no way to know how to handle things like customer specific contract pricing, or you might have some really complex tiered quantity breaks set up in your ERP, specific freight rules, or multi-step order approval workflows. These are all very unique from business to business, and that's why ERP implementers are experts. I mean, it's very complicated to set this up, and setting up all that kind of critical logic that is so important in that ERP implementation lives in the ERP, but a simple connector is going to fail to bring that to a website.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the folks like on the ground? What's the result? What happens to a business when that, they hit that trap and the integration falls short? I'm kind of thinking back to the beginning of our conversation of maybe we're back to data silos, right? Maybe we've kind of done that initial phase.
Yeah, I mean, I think when people are unaware of these types of blockers that are going to come up, and either they haven't planned around them or haven't accepted that they're going to be in place, it can be a project killer. I've seen projects stalled out for months, even a year. They can uncover a lot of bigger hidden costs that they didn't expect. And for me, kind of worst of all is the outcome, which is going to be a terrible customer experience. You start seeing, internal teams, they're quickly starting to create their own manual workarounds. They're bringing up new spreadsheets, creating new spreadsheets, and even rekeying orders across, several systems. If anything, even try to take on a digital process and try to streamline things, but you might even be introducing more manual overhead than you had before. And then on the customer side, I mean, you get maybe a B2B customer logs in, they see the wrong price, or maybe it's some inaccurate inventory, but then they end up just picking up the phone anyhow. And for me, I mean, that's completely defeating the purpose of a self-serve portal. All that money and investment is really not worth it if your customers won't adopt it. And then I think looking a little more kind of long-term, if you have a failed project like this, the starter projects, often you have teams, maybe they're in the marketing department, sales departments, maybe you actually have a dedicated commerce department. They've often climbed a big mountain to gain that internal stakeholder buy-in to actually proceed with the project at all. Now the project's gone sideways, and they've maybe potentially even lost those internal advocates for making these big digital transformations. And I've seen that have long-lasting impact on businesses, their willingness to be innovative and how they sell it to customers. They've been burnt and they don't want to do it again. And it's hard to quantify that. I mean, that slows down projects, slows down businesses, and kills their innovation, which is obviously the opposite of what anyone would want.
Yeah. So if plug and play is a trap, right? What's the right way to build those connections to handle all the complexity that a B2B company has?
Yeah, I mean, the right way is a tough question. There's many ways, but I think in our experience, I would kind of look at it. I'm going to kind of break it up into two pieces. So first is the technology. How do we actually get around those limitations? And the approach, no matter what it is, it has to be API first. But that's just the start. APIs, if anyone's familiar with them, think of them effectively as just like a pipe for data. Plugs in one area, plugs in the other, transfers data in a language that's agreed upon by both parties. So API. But what you really need to start thinking about is a intelligent integration layer, call it maybe a hub, that's going to actively manage that flow of all that complex business logic over to the e-commerce space. It's not just data, it's complex flows. And the big piece here is you think of this hub kind of sitting, strategically between an ERP and an e-commerce platform. It's ensuring that e-commerce platform is pulling all of that deep business logic and then accurately displaying it on the user experience. Looking at agencies' approach, there's a lot of agencies like ourselves who have recognized that this is a big challenge, it's a big gap, and we've gone ahead and developed our own accelerators that we include in our framework. Effectively, we've already kind of built that hub, or at least the framework for that hub, and that's going to serve as a starting point for projects that maybe need that kind of additional layer between an ERP and an e-commerce platform. And then these accelerators, depending on who you're working with, they're going to come with a series of pre-built connectors already established, a lot of tools to be able to develop those type of experiences, and you're kind of already kind of halfway there. And our development team loves these. Instead of building from scratch, accelerators are allowing our development teams to start with a good deal of the development already completed. We're not building a wheel from scratch. We're using tools that are pre-established, and we repurpose those and then build on top of those. I think the big piece here, the big value there, is it accelerates projects, and it's going to lower the long-term development costs. Things are quicker, they're cheaper. And then the flip side, so that's technology, that's the kind of really the how, or the kind of the nuts and bolts of how to do it. But I think beyond the technology, another real key that we see working time and time again is deep upfront planning, but just as important, having the ERP implementation partner and the digital agency working together from day one. So that would be like an us and an SVA or whoever the partners are. And I think if you look at what a company like SVA does, when you think about it, they spent months understanding every single nuance of business logic, all the pricing rules, inventory workflows, the customer segments. They know it technically better than absolutely anybody. They've built that in the ERP, and that knowledge they have is absolutely invaluable for agencies like ours. So when companies like SVA, they collaborate closely with an agency that's looking to build some digital experience, like I said, maybe some self-serve portal, it's ensuring that every bit of that hard-won intelligence in the ERP is correctly presented online. And I think looking at this collaboration, I mean, it really de-risks the entire project significantly. We want to ensure that whatever the customer sees online that we're developing, their pricing, their inventory, their specific rules, it's perfectly accurate. And it's ultimately maximizing that entire investment that's made on the ERP system and the partner themselves. I do want to maybe just share a story, Andrea, and I know I've been talking for a long time here. Guilty, I do that a lot. But I wanted to talk about an example of a project that we had where we experienced the struggles of not working closely with a ERP partner. This was years and years back. I'll probably be dating myself. I think it was more than 10 years back. And this was early stages of integrating ERPs with e-commerce platforms. The idea of like B2B e-commerce was very, very new, very, very cutting edge. And we had a client, they were a manufacturer. They build these very kind of bespoke high-end saunas that are very, very customizable products. And they were relying purely on their sales team to manually handle every order. They pick up the phone, take the order, input the deals in or the details in their ERP, and then even things like fulfillment, when the order is being shipped, what components the order has been shipped. The sales team would actually talk to the warehouse floor, get those details, and then email those clients or their clients those updates. So very, very manual, but very, very customized, very complex. And they decided, you know what, it's time to innovate. We got to look at streamlining our operations, but we also want to create some new digital buying options for the customers. Customers are starting to talk about, self-serve portals and kind of the challenges of making a phone call every time they want to learn something about their order. So they recognized this and they got ahead of it, and they were being very innovative. This is an early adopter of this kind of mindset. Just to kind of touch briefly on some of the technical challenges, they were using a cloud-based ERP, and then they're using an open source platform called Drupal for their content management system, and then also we're spinning up to handle e-commerce. And the big gap here is they needed to connect those two to really deliver that level of buying experience. They were aiming for both direct consumer and a business-to-business group. So two completely different buying groups. This is ambitious. They wanted to tackle a lot, and there was no connector even made, not even a base connector at that point. So we dove in. We started mapping out the solution. We were integration experts. We know integrations, and we started building the integration itself. However, their ERP and everything that was set up, it was honestly like an onion. Every time we pulled back a layer, we discovered more and more complexity that we didn't understand, we didn't set up, and moreover, the client didn't have a great understanding of it either. So the project, it's stalling, and we found ourselves really just spinning our wheels at every junction of the project. And the client, they're kind of playing the go-between between us and our ERP's, their partner team. They didn't really allow us to connect with them directly, so lots was lost in translation. Eventually, the project had been going really, really slow. We're hitting some barriers. We're missing some timelines. So we internally met and had an escalation meeting. And our VP of sales at the time asked a very, very simple question. And he just asked, can't we work directly with the ERP partner? It was a simple question, but it was profound. And it was very pivotal in the project. We came out of the meeting, pushed the client very hard, said we need to be introduced to your ERP partner. And then eventually we connected with them and we worked alongside them. They helped us during the additional pieces of planning we need to do, and all the way through implementation. As I look back on the project, like right to that point, we were hitting blocker after blocker. We didn't have the detailed context into what the ERP partner had set up. So every time we hit a blocker, it was like finding a needle in a haystack. We're searching. We just didn't have the context. But then once we had direct access to that ERP partner, we'd remove those headaches almost immediately. The project got back on track, and we ended up with a great success story for the business. Now, I think there was obviously a lot of negative impact, and we learned that the first half of the project probably went half the speed it could have. But once we, again, linked up with this team, we were able to jump over those hurdles very, very quickly, got the project back on track, and it was a great success. And now I look kind of forward to, now, years and years later, any project that we work with where we need to work with an ERP, first and foremost, we're identifying who that partner is, we're connecting with them, and working with them from day one. And I think that is just a paramount piece for any business that's looking to do any kind of an integration, if they're doing any kind of digital experience. Make sure that your, we call them VARs, but your ERP partner and your agency are connected and they're working together, because those ERP experts, they know ERPs inside and out. Agencies like us, we just scratch the surface. They really understand all that.
Yeah.
I do, and sorry, Andrew, I've been probably talking for 10 minutes straight. I had one final thing I want to say, just to make sure I'm not steering us in the wrong direction, but talking about native integrations and all their shortcomings, I do want to call out that they do have a place. There are business cases where using something out of the box is a good fit. And I think a good example would be if a business is maybe looking to maybe establish a new sales channel, but perhaps their stakeholders aren't bought in yet. They don't want to invest a lot of money, or maybe they're concerned, their existing customers aren't going to adopt this new process. A good approach in that case can be go lean, go scrappy, make it economical, use as much out-of-the-box functionality as possible. And that can be those native integrators. So aim to achieve something that's very kind of minimum viable product, or VIP, or MVP, sorry. Get that out the door as easily as possible with the least impact your business, both from a financial perspective and also like don't disrupt your team. They got processes in place. Let's not reinvent those right now. Let's test the market. And if it's being adopted, your customers are happy, that's proof that digital buying is something they're keen on. So now you have a much stronger business case to plan and build something more comprehensive. And just like Andrew was touching on, this land and expand, same with us. When I say comprehensive, our goal is always, hey, you should go in, do things iteratively. I would probably recommend at that point, interview your key customers, try to find, what are the largest areas of friction for their buying experience, and then just focus on that first. That might be maybe some self-serve reorder flow. They want to be able to reorder product easily. Focus on that, deliver that, show the value, and continue to build up the business case to continue expanding. I think this is always going to be the best approach. Go MVP, small, iterative, piece by piece. But I do want to really reiterate, though, I think any business that is going to go native integrations, they need to make sure that they're aware that those blockers are going to come. There is going to be a time where they quickly grow out of those kind of standard integrations, and they really need to plan in advance. You know, the last thing you want is be establishing a new sales channel. You're getting some momentum, you're getting some adoption, you're getting buy-in internally, you're starting to make some money, and then you hit a brick wall and all the growth is stifled and you can't figure out how to get around that wall. So be proactive, engage your agencies, engage your ERP partners, make sure you're talking about these challenges before they come up so that you have a plan when you do encounter them.
Yeah.
That's it, Andrea. Sorry, I was talking for ages there.
No, I mean, it kind of reminds me, Greg, of a paper I read about how people make decisions in terms of what, you know, what product they're going to buy, and how there's, you know, some biases that kind of start to impact that. And I'm sure you see the same thing. And one of the big one is optimism bias, right? So, you know, they start to believe that they're less likely to experience a negative event and more likely to experience something positive, right? And I think that's why you see a lot of investment in plug and play, right? Because they think, well, we're not that complex. I'm optimistic, right? I think this is going to work out just fine. And so it's easy to kind of take the surface view and say, well, we don't really need to get into the nuts and bolts of how the ERP was constructed. All we're trying to do is integrate, right? How hard can that be? And I think everyone wants to be optimistic and believe that it's going to just work out. But I think you make a really good point of, well, no, if you're doing the integration, you really do have to roll up your sleeves and see what you're integrating with. And by the way, there's cascading things that's going to impact as well.
Absolutely.
So to make it successful, you really do need the holistic vision. And I can also imagine, you know, I just, you know, I'll tell a story as well. So I have a mudroom in our house and it doesn't have any cabinetry in it. And so everything's always a mess, right? And so I made the decision to, well, I'm just going to buy some cabinets instead of having custom cabinetry. So of course they came. I had a terrible time kind of putting them together. I'm not great at building. And it turns out that the canned cabinetry didn't really fit right, even though I measured it, right? It didn't quite flow the way I wanted it to. And in fact, in retrospect, I would have spent less money, less time, less heartache, right? If I had just said, you know what, I'm going to spend a little bit more money and I'm going to go ahead and do the custom cabinetry, right? Any thoughts, Greg, or reactions to that? Because I'm sure you see that all the time of, hey, why don't I just pay the less expensive plug and play? I'm optimistic. I think it's going to work out. It's really hard to spend that extra money at that time, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Also, I love the analogy. I think we can all probably relate to, you know, a home project that we tackled that was maybe a little more difficult than we anticipated. And also optimism. I mean, I think optimism is great. We want people who are excited to tackle a new project, but wishful thinking only gets you so far, really. And yeah, I mean, it is a tough conversation, and it's one that we have all the time. I mean, I'm often talking to leaders who are just saying, like, listen, I want to get this out the door very quickly. What's the cheapest? What's the quickest? And in some cases, like I said, if you're simply trying to prove a sales channel is even something you should explore, yes, maybe doing it the cheapest makes sense. Granted, you're going to probably have a cheap experience. So understanding if that channel is something people want to adopt, tough to tell when the experience is going to be pretty clunky. But I do believe that there's a lot to be said for, like I said, deep upfront planning, understand, you know, where your dollar is going to make the best return for your business, attach business value to everything you're mapping out and planning, and then tackle that iteratively. Handle the high impact items first, cascade down to lower impact items. But if you're just relying on purely native integrations and you're going to try to build on top of that, it is a rocky foundation. It's not one that's going to allow you to build a couple stories high. You're going to have a one-bedroom rancher forever, unless you understand and recognize you're going to have to get around that. I would say in most cases, if you're talking purely economical, it's good to do it at the front. It's good to do it at the start, get around that right off the hop, build a foundation that can scale, make sure that you're already proactively getting around those barriers so you don't hit them at inopportune moments when you're trying to, you know, leverage your growth of your business. Maybe you got a big sales cycle coming and your systems just simply don't scale the way you sell. And yeah, get ahead of it. But it's kind of one of those things, right? Invest upfront. It is going to save money long term. It's just hard to sometimes make that case, especially if you're dealing with you know, committees and teams that are in, you know, older spaces. Manufacturing is kind of behind the times in a lot of spaces, and that's kind of where we target ourselves as B2B businesses. And sometimes buying is really, really tricky. And sometimes it's a matter of just getting in there, showing some value, doing it lean, doing it quick, and then building out something more comprehensive later.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this kind of brings us, we're halfway up the mountain here. I think this kind of brings us to the summit. And so Greg, I'm wondering if you can just kind of start to talk about, when a B2B company wants to launch a new e-commerce site or a customer portal, what does that AI and automation component look like, right? Like you just described, how do you bring on those advanced tools, especially for the customer facing side, and I'll advance it as well so you can kind of see those.
Yeah, fantastic question. I think this is probably one of the most common topics that I end up talking about at conferences or even internal meetings, external meetings, meeting with new prospects, new clients. I mean, everyone's excited about AI. And the one thing I want to say at the start here is that AI should not be just a checkbox that says, hey, we have done some level of AI with our business. I think companies got to start diving a little bit deeper into what AI can do and can actually complement their business specifically. But I think to take it a step back, so yeah, we're at Basecamp. Andrew's team has built this amazing ERP setup. It's replicating your business logic. It complements the way you sell. We've now kind of climbed that mountain. We've now extended that to some digital experiences. Maybe that's a direct-to-consumer flow, or maybe it's more of a self-serve for businesses themselves. Now it's a matter of how can we leverage AI to really expand on those offerings and really make the richest experience possible. And honestly, AI starts with data. It always does. AI leverages data. It looks at data. That's how it basically puts together its recommendations. And we always use the term garbage in, garbage out. AI is 100% dependent on good unified data. So if the data is bad, the AI is going to be bad. Its recommendations are going to be bad. If your e-commerce site and ERP are disconnected, those AI tools are essentially blind. How can we expose AI to your customers when there's no connection to the data that really represents who those customers are? So if those are disconnected, you can't personalize the experience. If you don't really know what a customer's true order history, things like contract terms, what is their credit limit from the ERP? These are things that can be leveraged by AI to really provide a good experience. And to kind of take a step back to that idea of a checkbox, I see a lot of businesses today, they hear AI, they acknowledge they got to leverage it, but they often stop at just implementing something like a simple AI chatbot. We've seen those all over the time. You see the little chatbot, asks you what you're looking for, can it help you? But honestly, more often than not, those chatbots are very surface level. They're effectively just indexing the content on the website, and they're really served as like an improved search bar. And I think chatbots, they can be helpful, and there's ways to expand that for sure. But I do think that the power of AI for the customer experience is going to go far, far beyond that. And again, if your systems are connected. A couple areas that we're seeing that's really exciting, AI being leveraged for kind of customer side of things. First one is like true hyper personalization. We want to go beyond just customers who bought this, bought that. We want to provide recommendations like based on your specific contract, your past order frequency, and upcoming project milestones. Here are the exact parts we recommend you order next week. I think that's going to be a far more effective experience than just a simple answer from a chatbot. You also, a big area we're seeing a lot of people explore is predictive reordering. So having AI analyze historic data to proactively suggest or even pre-fill customer orders for replenishment. It's saving the customers time. It's reminding them we got to do these reorders. And it's also helping them understand what they physically should be reordering. What are they low on? What do they need to order again? And when should they order it? Also, just thinking about ERP, you can tie in more of the dynamic, more complicated kind of rule-based pricing that we see in ERPs. So the AI can go present their exact contract pricing or the best possible tier discount, and they can do that in real time. And I think that the big benefit of providing that kind of value is really building trust with the customers. You're showing we are leveraging our tools to try to provide you the best tier, the best pricing possible. And I mean, that's obviously always going to go a long way with the customer. And I did talk about the chatbot being kind of a glorified search bar. Definitely AI can be used to improve searching as well. I think we've all experienced, browsing a website and we dealt with poor search results or filters that are just leaving us fighting to try to navigate that catalog. AI, they really can understand users' intent much better. So they can really help quickly guide B2B buyers to, the exact highly specific product that they need, even if their search terms aren't very good. AI is really good at dealing with misspelling, even the wrong SKU numbers and pieces like that. It's very intelligent. With kind of standard search tools are more just very like, you get what you get out what you put in. And if you're filling it with typos, it's going to give you results with typos, and it probably won't find the products you're looking for. I think AI, it's clearly a hot topic. Obviously an exciting one as well. And I know this is an area I get really excited about, figuring out how we can leverage AI, beyond those simple chatbots. But I do want to really emphasize it's all dependent on data. So when your systems are truly connected, you move away from shouting the same message to everyone or just offering basic assistance to providing that true kind of predictive and, I'd say, incredibly valuable engagement that's going to streamline the customer's entire buying journey. So very powerful stuff. It's something I'm very passionate about. Andrew, I'm hoping to flip the script on you, if that's okay. AI is obviously something we touch pretty frequently, being that we're more on the customer side of things. And we talk about data, and obviously data flows kind of both ways. From your perspective, working with that foundational ERP, even CRM data, where do you see, the most practical, immediate wins for AI more on the operational side of the business?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Greg, and you're right, it's everywhere, right? Everyone wants to use and certainly has anxiety around wanting to adopt AI into their company. I just listened or read an interview of a guy who tried not to use any AI for an entire week and ended up having to, forage for food, right? Because AI is actually involved in all of the supply chain planning and everything around that, right? And can you use electricity? No, you can't, right? So I'll say, just kind of start with, AI is not new, right? It's been around for a long time, and it's certainly entrenched in a lot of the things that you probably didn't know it was entrenched in. And so, as much as we can start to demystify what that looks like, I think we should, because it shouldn't be abstract to folks. I think what we've seen with ChatGPT is that adoption is high. There's probably lots of folks, maybe in your company even, that are using, maybe yourself, ChatGPT, but disruption is low in that it's not producing that ROI, especially at a enterprise level that you're quite looking for. And I think there's a really easy tendency to overthink, oh, it's this huge, maybe bespoke solution, but it doesn't have to be, right? So things as simple as, I have a tool in my ERP that can bring in a PDF AP bill and create that bill for me, right? That's AI. Components of automation can be AI, right? And a lot of that can be huge time savers. And if it lets you kind of enter the data faster or get more accurate data in more quickly, then it's a win, right? Things like duplicate validation. So on the CRM side, if I'm entering John Smith and there's already a John Smith in there, can the system go and say, hey, is this the same entry or is it not, right? And so again, I know AI is like highly technical, highly innovative, but it's actually very simple. So just try to relate it to your day-to-day, and appreciate that if you feel overwhelmed by it, everyone feels overwhelmed by it. And in fact, it is kind of this like this big bubble right now that if we just kind of start to think about, hey, just AP bill entry, duplicate validation, right? Bank reconciliation. I bring in transactions from the bank, kind of, start to auto match it, right? So again, not super innovative. These are concepts that were around, a decade ago. It's just kind of getting better at it, right? So that's where it would start. And we also see this kind of outsized spend on marketing and sales with AI, but not the ROI. Where we do see the ROI is actually in the back office with those tools that I just talked about. So those are really like the powerful way to kind of save a lot of time. And it's not that when we save time, we're firing people because, like Amazon just did, because we don't need their work. What that allows them to do is rather focus that 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week on something else that's maybe a little bit more strategic that an AI tool cannot do. So people are, of course, they're needed. I think it's like, I was reading that when the washing machine, was invented, everyone thought, wow, this is going to save a lot of time. Well, it didn't really save time. It just meant that the standards for cleanliness got higher. I think we'll probably see something pretty similar with AI.
That's great insight. I guess just so I guess similar to how you tackle projects, I guess the idea would be do it iteratively is the same thing. Pick a certain flow in your operations department that could benefit from AI, try it out, and grow from there. Kind of like the land and expand that you coined earlier. I like that. I
Yeah.
guess kind of question on AI. I think obviously we can agree that AI is built on data, and that is a key component. And from your perspective, again, being on the ERP, the CRM expert side, what is maybe the biggest data quality kind of gotcha that companies need to fix before they can start really looking to leverage AI effectively?
Yeah, I mean, so the trick there is getting data correct at the source, right? And so things like, that duplicate validation can be key. I mean, but I don't think we can do this without kind of classic data governance processes, like having the concept of a golden record and having a data steward and having people assigned to oversee the quality of the data in the system, right? It can't be without people, going through and kind of looking at things and curating it and making sure that it's accurate.
When you talk of people, so let's say a company gets their data clean, it's good at the source, it's correct their systems. I think probably the next big hurdle is often the people. So you talked about AI being kind of this big bubble, being a little bit scary, and I think AI can be really intimidating. I think a lot of employees are worried it's here to replace them. I guess from your guys' perspective, how do you at SVI advise clients on managing the human side of AI adoption and then really getting that team buy-in and navigating those concerns that are floating around with every business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the classic like change management methodology of, the what's in it for me, right? Like why would I
Yeah,
adopt
yeah.
it if I think that I'm going to lose my job, right? I think it has to be attractive in that it saves you time so that you can work on more strategic things, right? And so I think really painting the picture of the benefits, not just the function of what it does, but why do you care, right? Why is it going to help you?
Right.
I think that can be the thing that kind of makes people more excited about it.
And I guess, I mean, I think you used the term earlier, augmentation. It's not meant to replace someone. It's meant to make them more productive and more efficient. So I guess my last question to you on AI is, I think when we look at AI, it's a big abstract cost. And obviously businesses want to make sure they can measure ROI. How do you recommend that businesses measure ROI on like AI initiatives? Is it about efficiency? Or is there any other metrics maybe they should be aiming to track to understand they're getting value out of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't think it's different than how you would look at like the ROI of another system, right? Or because it's just a cluster of functions and tools, right? And so, you can look at hours saved, right? And I would encourage you when you do an ROI analysis to document your assumptions and your calculations because it's not uncommon that they're, heavily contested. But really you're looking at what did I spend on the investment? In terms of the dollars to build that solution, the dollars for that subscription, and also include the number of hours that maybe you had to engage leadership or folks on the ground to kind of get it spun up. So quantify the investment, quantify the return too, right? Is it going to save you hours? Is it going to allow you to not have so many systems perhaps, or shed a few different functions maybe that you use now that you don't need to, right? And so it really does become just like if you can quantify everything and state those assumptions, that's where that can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's great. I guess AI is very new and unique, but the approach to planning around it doesn't have to be. It's just like any other new initiative in a project or a business. That's great. I like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think, this is just our last slide here. So we kind of started with the base camp, we went up the summit, and then we kind of started to talk about AI and optimization there. Just some big takeaways, always be cautious of a plug and play, especially when we start to think about the complexities of B2B logic and those kind of solutions. AI is only powerful when your systems are truly connected, right? And your data is clean, to Greg's point. And your people are on board. It's all about obviously the people and adoption. Any questions, or Greg, anything to add in that?
The only thing I would add, Andrea, would be kind of what I touched on, this concept of, ERP implementation partners working closely with the agencies. I think that I would say in some cases the value of that relationship is a little one way. We obviously want to leverage a lot of SVA's expertise and what they've already established, but there's no reason that that also can't happen early on. If SVA's planning out a ERP implementation and maybe e-commerce is further down the path on a future roadmap, there's no reason you can't engage an agency early on to help guide that and make sure that what the ERP partner is setting up does align with some future e-commerce initiatives. Obviously, we touch a very, very small part of the ERP, so we have a little less to give than something like SVA. But yeah, I would really encourage businesses try to get those two teams working together, get them talking. We've seen the value of it time and time again, and it really, really helps accelerate projects and allows us to deliver the best possible outcomes.
Awesome. On that note, it looks like we do have a couple of questions that have populated in the chat and maybe a couple others coming our way. So the first one we have, I think, would be kind of for both of you, Greg and Andrea. Someone asked, when clients are evaluating different tools, do you also provide guidance on integration architecture or ecosystem alignment?
Yeah, I can go first. So I would say absolutely, right? Your systems don't exist in a vacuum. And so part of our work is we call it the solar system, right? Like developing a system map and understanding their integration points. And certainly in the technical requirements for a solution, it's so easy to only focus on function, right? I want it to do this. I want these bells and whistles and forget about the technical side. Does it have an open API? Can I customize it? Is it built on proprietary code, right? So that is absolutely, that's kind of front and center, especially when we look at ERP solutions, because a lot of them in terms of functionality look very similar. There's not that many differences when I want to do a journal entry and reversing entry, right? There's some nuances between them, but where we really start to see those differences are in the technical framework and the ability to integrate, which is critical. Greg, anything to add there?
Maybe a little piece. Yeah, I think great answer, by the way, Andrea. I think, yeah, this is paramount. I mean, assessing what systems are in place and putting together a corresponding architecture that makes sense is a primary thing, offering that we provide. I would say that often when we go into a project, if the ERP partner was not as thorough as SVA tends to be, there might not be any kind of a plan or like a technology architecture diagram or anything in place yet. So we have to go in and we have to do a lot of that discovery ourselves. I would say companies like SVA are way ahead of the game. If we jump into a project and there's already a lot of that groundwork already done, they've already mapped out the systems that they're touching. That gives our team a starting point to show, okay, this is the existing current makeup of systems. Adding anything new on the e-commerce side, how are those going to impact those systems? We then don't have to go and do all that discovery ourselves. Obviously, that saves time, saves money. But yeah, I think it's critical, obviously, to have a proper architecture and a map before you proceed with any development.
Awesome. Kind of as a follow-up to that, someone else had asked, when evaluating a new ERP or e-commerce platform, what are the key factors that businesses should look at beyond just features?
Yeah,
I think I'll hand that one to you, Andrea, if that's okay.
Yeah. So I mentioned the technology or the architecture framework, right? How easy is it to customize? How easy is it to integrate? I mentioned open APIs for integration. Another one is the roadmap of the manufacturer. Are they investing in the product? How much do they spend back in the R&D? Do they have strong thought leadership in terms of where they're taking that product? Because when we start to see, a good early warning sign for products that start to be either sunset or sold, is a lack of investment there. And so that is like absolutely critical. Also look at the types of models that they do pricing, right? So like, is it by named user? Is it by consumption? And then start to think about what's going to be most cost effective for you. And then of course it's all also like the non-functional component is also, a lot about the partnership. So in the people, process, technology triangle, folks tend to just laser focus on technology, but in fact, the partnership, who's implementing, who you're going to be interacting with day to day. Do you want it to be a consulting firm or a large organization, right? So think about what works for you and your company, especially in terms of culture and personality.
Awesome. And then I think one more on this side that just popped in. Someone said that their company is thinking about a digital transformation project. But obviously, people have a lot of different definitions within the organization of what that might mean. Where should they start? Does it start with just a meeting with one of you? Can someone talk to what the best place to start is?
Yeah, I mean, really, that is kind of where we start with our alignment cycle, right? And so that your topic would be, what a successful digital transformation, right? And so really systematically sort the interviewing and surfacing, people's opinions on that, and then forming that roadmap of agreed upon goals that are prioritized as well. That's really critical. So yeah, I would love, please set up a call with us because we'd love to explore that further.
Yeah, same for me, Kaylee. I have many calls that are discovery calls, we call them, and often the outcome of that call is just some insight shared. I provide some education and answer some questions. I am always happy to do that. I love to share the knowledge when I can. I like to learn something new when I can as well. So that's often the starting point for us, is if you're not sure where to start, a conversation is going to be the first starting point. It doesn't cost you anything to talk to a salesperson or talk to an architect. And yeah, that's typically where we're going to start things off and understand what they're hoping to get out of it, and maybe engage some other stakeholders further down the line. But I think every opportunity starts with open conversations and some education right up front.
Awesome. All right. It looks like those were the questions in the chat. Not sure if there's any stragglers or not, but I'll kind of pass it back to Greg and Andrea for a brief wrap up.
I guess first I'll just say, Andrea, thank you so much for having me. This is great. I feel like we could chat like this all day long. So yeah, really appreciate it. Hopefully we shared something of some value today. Obviously there's only so much we can talk about in half an hour, 45 minutes. So scratch the surface, but I think there's some cool topics here to touch on. So yeah, really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks again for having me.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for joining. This has been a lot of fun. And I'll also say for the audience, please, like Greg said, it doesn't cost anything to just kind of set up a call. Love to get to know you and to learn your use cases and situation a little bit more. So thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.